You're listening to Arcane Carolinas, an exploration of the Carolinas' folklore, legends, myths, and modern weird. Each episode, we examine the historical context of our topic and aim to preserve some of the stories that help make this part of the world such a fascinating place. Hello, Michael.
Hello, Charlie.
Welcome to the 101st episode of Arcane Carolinas.
Oh, 101st.
101. We're not going to say the number of all of these going forward. It just, after 100, it kind of felt like, ooh, 101. Cool.
It's really wild. I don't know. I said that in the 100th episode also, but it remains true.
So we've managed to pick up a few folks new to us in the last couple of weeks, with the spooky season deluge of content. So this is sort of our annual lighter episode, the Halloween hangover, if you will. And I wanted to use it as an opportunity to discuss some of the things that we talk about. So people that are like just jumped in, I highly recommend you go back to episode 1 and start there. But if you say, you can't tell me what to do, we'll use this as an opportunity to kind of at a high level go over things that we talk about and then get a little more granular on a very specific thing. Before we do that, this is arguably, I got my serious voice on now. Please, if you like Arcane Carolinas, if you enjoy this show, please go to wral.com/VCAS. This is not funny, Michael. Don't laugh at me. This is very serious business.
You can't tell me what to do.
I think somebody once asked me, what's it like working with Michael? And I was like, well, have you ever owned a cat? There's no doubt that you and the cat get along, but you can never tell the cat what to do.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate.
You might suggest things. Sometimes the cat may do that. Other times it may not.
Sometimes I have to be pushed with your foot.
Yeah, there was that one convention. That's a joke. I can't actually think of an instance. Anyway, please go to wral.com/VCAS and vote for Arcane Carolinas in the Professional and Entertainment Podcast category in this year's Voters' Choice Awards. We would really appreciate it. The competition is very fierce, and we just want to show up. We don't want to go quietly into the night in the face of competition. We want to really show up and give it our best shot.
Yeah, totally. We talked about this some in the 100th episode, but things like that, they're not like why you do something, but they're nice.
And also, I feel like it's a win for our folks that are here with us in a way where it's, you look at the shows that are on there and it's representation. People like learning about history and weird stories, and to have that recognized, I think, has value.
And I think it's more fun when a show that's a passion project wins than, somebody with a bunch of corporate backing.
That's true, too. There's always that. It's a real David and Goliath story. So anyway, please go vote for us in the WRAL Voters' Choice Awards. And please do it before, I think it's November 19th. Do it now. You won't hear me say that again, at least this year. So if you're new to the show, things we talk about a lot about UFOs. We talk a lot about cryptids. We talk a lot about hidden history and just stories that are weird or maybe lesser known in the history of the Carolinas.
Hauntings, strange beasts that people see in the woods. We talk about all kinds of things.
But one of the things that always gets a rise out of people and that we really enjoy talking about are ghost stories.
Yes.
And ghosts. And I thought for a Halloween hangover episode, like we've done in the past, we take a meandering conversation. I thought we'd talk about ghosts and the types of ghosts that we have talked about, breaking them down by category, and then having a discussion around where we think some of the stories we've covered would fit in those categories. And that sort of serves as a primer for past episodes as well. Oh, you might have missed that one, or, we can hint at future episodes and say, we're going to do one that fits here, that kind of thing.
Okay. I like that a lot.
And before we get into my list, I have a very extensive Charlie's Guide to Ghosts to walk you through. And I am not the keeper of any hidden truth. I do not have the answers to the mysteries of the universe. This is just how I'm breaking them down for the sake of this conversation.
Yeah, at no point do I want to be perceived as dogmatic.
Right. So a ghost or a spirit, we've talked about this. Some interpretations are that it is the disembodied soul of the deceased moving about within our world. Other theories are that it's more of a recording in time. And, you get into quantum physics and subatomic particles and how nothing ever really goes away. And maybe those particles can reassemble themselves as sort of a playback of a highly emotional time. But none of us are quantum scientists, and I'm not going to pretend to understand those theories.
Yeah, in the same sense that I don't want to be perceived as dogmatic about a belief, I also don't want to be mistaken for an actual scientist.
Right. But that is one of the theories that people have, is that psychic trauma or psychic replay of events is carried out. And that's what, when people see a ghost or a spirit, they're actually seeing. It's not an intelligent entity. It's not a disembodied soul. Some people will say that the appearance of a ghost or a spirit is neither the disembodied soul of a person or a replay, but rather some other extra dimensional being manifesting in a way that looks like whatever the person is perceiving. It's malicious or benevolent.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And, with the idea of it being a replay, that's often referred to as stone tape theory, the idea being that some sort of psychic energy imprints on the physical materials where that event occurred and thus is sort of repeated through history.
Now that we have sort of how people try to explain the phenomena, ways I'm going to categorize these spirits, ghosts, would be, are they corporeal or not? Are they like corporeals, like of the body, right? Do they manifest in such a way that they appear as a body, or is it something more like a mist or an environmental phenomena, like a light, something like that? And then I'm also going to add, are they able to interact with physical space?
Okay, that was going to be one of my questions.
Or physical objects, right? As we perceive them. I want to start with a fun one right off the top. Here's my first category. Household spirits, generally corporeal and able to interact with physical space. I would say that Little Red Man of Winston-Salem, named such for his red hat, I'd say he's a household spirit because he haunts a specific household, the single brother's home.
I can see that. My initial reaction to the phrase household spirit was, do you mean like goblins, hobgoblins, brownies, things like that? The idea of something that isn't necessarily the spirit of a dead person, but is a spiritual entity that is attached to home and often mischievous. And other than that spirit of a dead person part, I think that the Little Red Man of Old Salem fits very well into that category because he is actively mischievous.
Right. He's not confused. It's not like a replay or like an entity and we'll get into confused spirits as a whole own category, but it seems to be aware of what's going on around it.
And consciously interacting.
Yeah. So that's a fun episode. Do you think fae creatures count as household spirits?
No. I said that hurriedly because I think that we should respect them as their own thing and not draw their attention.
So Sir Walter Scott, lawyer, novelist, poet, historian, biographer. He wrote Ivanhoe, Rob Roy. He had a lot to say in general about history and the history of mankind's superstitions and beliefs and the supernatural. And he actually wrote a letter to his son-in-law at one point, specifically on the topic of fae creatures and exploring them as supernatural beings classified as neither angel, devil, nor soul of deceased man. So to your point, as like their own little magical creatures.
Their own potentially very powerful, highly respected, not necessarily invited around magical creatures.
Right. But distinctly different than household spirits.
Yes.
So when we talk about the goblins of the Uwaris, they are not household spirits. That was another story that I enjoyed. So moving on from what I consider cute little creatures, cute little spirits, poltergeists.
That's a type of household spirit.
Well, I would consider that to be non-corporeal, able to interact with physical space. And as we've explored in our poltergeist episodes, potentially just telekinetic manifestations brought on by an individual, not a spirit at all.
Yeah, I think the prevalence of their association with households with somebody who has just entered puberty or is just about to exit puberty says a lot. There's something there, I think, about there just being a telekinetic manifestation in the course of the formation of that person's brain. I think that's one of those situations that probably has a scientific explanation, but we don't yet have the science.
The one that springs to mind immediately is the Bladenboro poltergeist story.
Yes.
Bladenboro, North Carolina. That was an episode that was fun.
The pyromaniac poltergeist.
Yeah. My pants are on fire. So that's a category. So we have household spirits. We have poltergeists as their own thing. And that, again, this is just based on my interpretation and my belief structure that it's probably not a spirit. That's why I break it out separate from household spirits. But I understand that poltergeists are reported as such.
I said that at the beginning, ironically, because they tend to be attached to it seems from reports like they're more attached to a family than to a home, but because that family tends to live in one place, then it feels as though it is attached to their home. And there are some stories of them where they're more attached to the home than to the people who live there. But, point being, in my head, they are the spirit of a deceased person, or there's some sort of totally external spirit entity that doesn't really have anything to do with the deceased person, but either way, just mad as all get out.
They're not a happy little guy. It's the opposite of the Little Red Man of Winston-Salem. Next category I'll present for discussion would be confused ghosts.
That's probably what I am. That's what I say. That's what I feel like this morning.
Hopefully we can get you in a better place.
Yeah.
I would say that they can be corporeal with some possible partial manifestations, either mists or sounds. They can manifest as sounds and not likely to interact with physical space.
Just to give an example to make sure that I'm thinking of the right kind of thing. Sometimes paranormal researchers who get electronic voice phenomena, EVP recordings, will have recordings that seem, and I'm going to just not address the question of whether it's purely suggestibility, but they seem to be a voice asking questions that indicate that the voice does not understand its current circumstance, as if it were the spirit of a person that does not realize they are dead.
Yeah, so that is a perfect example of a non-corporeal manifestation in this category.
Okay.
Now, for the corporeal manifestation, you might have something like the Hunter of Purgatory Mountain, where the deceased soul of this individual wanders the mountain in search for their quarry because they're just stuck up there. That's where they died, and they can't really figure out why they can't find their quarry or move on. I think Tally Johnson shared a story about a seemingly confused ghost at one point with us in one of our Tally Tales. A really good example would be Lydia of Lydia's Bridge, like the Phantom Hitchhiker story.
In one of the ones that I can think of immediately that Tally told, he was with his uncle and they encountered what seemed to be the spirits of two soldiers from the Revolutionary War who were asking directions.
Yes, that's the one I was thinking of. Yeah. I wanted to mention Lydia's Bridge because several people have said, hey, are you going to talk about that? We have peers in this space. We have friends in this space that do history shows, and that has been done exceptionally well by Carolina Haints to the point where they helped get a historical marker put up there. And that is still very fresh. So we will eventually do Lydia's Bridge as an episode. But right now it's sort of their moment to shine with that, having just got that historical marker done. And I don't want to step on their moment.
Yeah, totally. I would much rather point people to them to celebrate what they've achieved.
Yes, exactly. So for the folks that have told us, hey, you need to do this, that's why we haven't. We are aware of it. It's on the list. It's in the bucket of ideas. But because we operate in a small circle, it's important to respect our peers and what they've accomplished.
Yeah.
Which brings me to my next category, which is really fun. Animal ghosts.
Animal ghosts. There's a theory that the Beast of Bladenboro was an animal ghost.
Yeah, there is. Vampiric Flying Panther, which is my favorite version of the Beast of Bladenboro. But spirits that manifest as animals or the spirits of animals, I think of the demon dog of Valley Crucis.
Yeah, absolutely.
When I went to Abbeville, somebody told me a story that there was spectral horses that have been seen running into some stables downtown, old stables that have been repurposed, and phantom smells.
There's a ghost story from Winston-Salem that I didn't cover when we were at Congregate, and there's not really a lot of story to it. So it's not ever really going to be episode material. A story of ghost horses pulling a tobacco wagon through the streets of Winston-Salem.
We are going to get to something like that.
And speaking of Tally, in one of Tally's books, which if I remember correctly is Ghosts of the South Carolina Upstate or Ghosts of the South Carolina Upcountry, I'll link to it in the show notes to make sure that I get the title right. Point being, in that book, one of the stories he tells is that shortly after he and his wife started dating, his wife's family's cat passed away of old age after many long years. When alive, that cat had a habit of jumping up onto the kitchen counter, and when they were sitting on the back porch of his wife's parents' house, they would see the cat do so or hear the cat do so and holler at it to get off the counter. And about a week after it had passed away, they were sitting on the back porch of her parents' house and heard the cat jump up onto the counter. And they both yelled at it to get off the counter and then realized, oh, that was impossible. And then his future mother-in-law said, oh, that's just the cat. He just wants to get up there and remind us that he's still around.
It's crazy. That's a great example. Ones with question marks. Would you consider the baby that turned into a cat in the Choratry episode, which we know is fiction? Would you consider that a ghost cat? A spirit cat?
I'm going to say, because this is what I prefer.
Okay.
That it is the spirit of a cat that has learned how to turn into a baby to get people's attention.
That's a very cat thing to do.
Isn't it?
And I couldn't remember this. Witch Anne was a story that you covered exceptionally well. Her horse, did she ride a spectral horse or was it a regular horse?
It was a regular horse, but there was a second version of the legend that had been recorded by the Historical Society in that county. And in that second version of the legend, she had a cat that was immortal.
Okay. Did not turn into a baby that we are aware of. The next category that I have, can you tell I really put some thought into this?
I can, yeah. I want to see the spreadsheet.
You know me. It's an exceptionally messy Word document. Okay. You know how I do. The indentations are off. There's random capitalization, which is why you get an editor when you publish a book. The Arcane Carolinas book volume 1 is available now on Amazon.com and has been wonderfully edited.
That's true.
Phantom vehicles.
Oh, which kind of also the Winston-Salem ghost horses pulling the tobacco wagon.
Right. And that's why when you said that, I kind of lit up a little bit. I was like, we're going to get to that. I would say that these could be corporeal or manifest as just a light, like the Payne Road, like you'd see headlights behind you, but not a car. And then they'd just be gone. Stagecoach Rock is a full corporeal manifestation.
Oh, yeah, totally. I just thought of another animal ghost, obviously, the ghost hound of Goshen Hill.
Oh, yeah. Happy Dog, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's the one that I don't love a lot, but it bears mentioning, which is the ghost train of the Catsboro Country Store.
Right. Yeah.
Which that one, I don't know. I couldn't get a lot of meat on the bone for that one, but it bears mentioning. It bears mentioning. Talking about types of ghosts in this episode.
I will say that despite, the perhaps absence of any verifiable history to support that legend, the store itself, before it was demolished, was a really interesting location and a really cool looking place.
Yeah, I'm happy that I got to get up there before it was gone. So that sort of leads into the next one, which arguably the Payne Road car could be considered a ghost light, non-corporeal, just a light. Lights are obviously a point of interest for you. Examples being the Mako light, the Land's End light, which we very recently talked about on the Sea Island Spirit series, which you can see on YouTube at the Beaufort County Television page or on our Facebook page. See what I did there?
Both of which will be linked in the show notes.
Slide a little plug in there. We made video. People kept telling us make video. We got invited to be a part of something with video. We said yes.
The best kind of video content is the one we don't have to make and edit ourselves.
Yes, we are not video producers, which if you've seen our commercial for the WRAL Voters' Choice Awards, you will understand, oh, they really are not video producers. They can make 1 minute long jokey videos.
We occasionally have people say, why aren't you on TikTok? And the answer is because that would be our one video on TikTok forever.
Right. We are not producers of video. We are not opposed to working with people that can produce video, though, which is why we loved working with Beaufort County Television. They were wonderful. They let us just be us, and they used it in a TV show, which was super cool.
Super fun to do, too.
But yeah, ghost lights. Now, we did debate this in Sensible Spirits / Reasonable Ghosts. The Brown Mountain Lights. Some people will say those are ghost lights. Some people will say it's geological phenomena. Other people will say it's UFOs. That one really seems to be in the eye of the beholder as to what the phenomena could be.
Yeah, I give the ghost theory a thumbs down. I also give every other theory a thumbs down. So that's not hating on the ghost theory. But I just don't think that any of the stories that are supplied as explanations have any ring of truth to them at all. I just don't buy any of the stories. It doesn't make any sense to me that they're ghosts.
It's just such an interesting phenomena that it bears mentioning because it does happen. It is there. Some people will say it's ghosts. The Brown Mountain Lights Festival doesn't just lean in to their angle. They jump in feet first to the deep end of its aliens. I mean, the whole thing is themed aliens, grays, traditional, X-Files looking grays. I don't necessarily share that view of the Brown Mountain Lights, but it is one.
There's of other ghost lights, though.
Yeah.
I think it's worth noting that ghost lights fall into one of two categories. A person looking for something, the spirit of a dead person looking for something, usually their head, or a vehicle that is no longer in existence. And that vehicle is almost always a train. The Payne Road is kind of a special case, but all the other ghost lights are almost always a train, especially a train where an accident happened. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a really interesting thing because, I don't know, maybe this is going to be too deep of a philosophical cut, but what do we as people experience of a train at night? We see the light approaching in the distance. We don't see the train. The light blinds us to being able to see the train behind it. We see the light. And in popular culture, whenever we represent a train, or in language, when we metaphorically refer to trains, it's the light at the end of the tunnel, or is the light at the end of the tunnel a train? That sort of cynical response to the optimism. In popular culture, we have countless representations of a train's dangerous approach as being a light emerging from a tunnel or emerging from the darkness on a track. And I think that's interesting because it suggests, what if the light is not the spirit of a train or of the people who were on it or anything like that, but it is instead a collective psychic manifestation based on the living people who perceive it participating in a wide scale, low level sort of background radiation psychic event.
I love those. I love that theory. Thank you for plugging that in there.
Yeah, no problem.
Because I have fallen back on that several times. That's always my go-to. Or it's just this. So I am.
Or we're all just a little psychic.
Right. This next one is very sad, but it is a phenomena and a type of ghost or spirit. And that would be the crybaby ghost phenomena.
Oh, yeah. There are a lot of crybaby bridges.
There's a lot of crybaby bridges. There's Crybaby Lane in Raleigh, which I absolutely shredded in the GalaxyCon episode. You're welcome. You can go to that field without feeling guilt or bad about dead children because they didn't happen there. And then the recent
happen at all.
Right. It was one guy, the Bohemian, jumped off the roof, described in the newspaper as local Bohemian.
Yeah. A, they didn't happen. And B, they didn't happen there.
Right. The recent dorm revelation that you shared was interesting as well, but it's a phenomena, right? Like it's a category of reported ghost phenomena. This is a non-corporeal phenomena. This is audio only, same as the ghost lights, non-corporeal. It's visual, but it's not a body.
I think that, again, I'm going to say maybe that speaks to the sort of low-level background psychic power that I think that every human being or conscious entity has. And again, in that same tally book, actually, The Ghost of Upstate South Carolina, he talks about how many Crybaby Bridge stories there are in just a very small area in South Carolina. And interestingly, goes to a bunch of them. And in some of them says, even though there's no particular reason to believe the legend that's attached to this, I did the thing where I stopped on the bridge at the right time and I stood on the bridge and waited and I heard a crying baby. And my personal theory on this is not Tally saying this is me, Michael G. Williams, saying this. My personal theory is that we're probably hearing wildlife that sounds like a crying baby in some way.
I mean, if you've ever heard a wild cat in the woods at night, it is horrifying.
Oh, yeah. I mean, when I was a child, I had the existence of mountain lions explained to me by my grandmother as, well, you'll know what it sounds like because it sounds like a woman being murdered in the woods.
Right.
We lived in a small enough place where if that happened, somebody would notice, So it was easy to pick that sound out. I had gone back to the house saying, I think I hear someone screaming in the woods. And my grandmother came and listened and was like, oh, that's just a mountain lion. But, I think that there's a possibility that what we're hearing is some sort of wildlife phenomenon or something that people just don't recognize. I don't know. I'm making a very dismissive, reductive statement when I say that. But how many places are we supposed to think that babies got thrown over bridges?
Right. Like you said, people would notice. There would be repercussions moving forward from that sad one, which I don't like. Elemental spirits, possible partial manifestations.
Define what you mean by elemental spirits, because I have some very specific definitions for that term.
Okay. I'm thinking a spirit or entity that manifests in the form of earth, wind, and fire, not to reference the band, but like in physical space. So like a cold spot in the Dunhill Hotel. There's a spot that localized environment has elemental changes in that the air is measurably colder in a specific spot for no explanation other than it's just this place is haunted and it's cold here. Or I would argue that maybe the French broad siren is a river spirit, is an elemental water spirit drawing someone into the water. That would be malicious. That would be a malevolent instance in that case.
It makes terrible radio, but I'm nodding slowly as I consider. Yes, go ahead.
The firebug, going back to the Bladenboro poltergeist, could that be argued that is an elemental manifestation of a spirit? Again, we don't have the answers to the unknown or the unexplained. This is just my trying to break down the different types of stories that we've shared about ghosts.
Yeah, that's true. So from your perspective, the definition is an experience, regardless of explanation, an experience that is more associated with what might be considered one of the four traditional elements of Greek myth.
Yes.
Okay.
Anyways, that's what I have.
When I hear a story of a cold spot in a haunted house, I just immediately assume that's somebody walking through a ghost, which might be wrong. I don't know. I have no idea. I am the least qualified person to have an opinion on it, actually. but that's my take. In the haunting that I experienced in college, the closest I could say I got to that sort of thing was feeling as if the air were bubbling or boiling around me as I left through it. And it wasn't a cold spot. It wasn't hot. I didn't feel heat. I didn't feel wind even on my skin. I don't know how to describe it other than what I said at the time to a friend afterwards, which was I felt like the air was bubbling around me. And it was almost auditory. It was a very strange experience. And I've never really read anything exactly like it. And I don't claim that gives me any unique authority over it either. I can see what you mean of breaking it down, not as an explanation, but as a category of experience.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I'm going for. Moving forward to a fun one that I think you're going to like, who's going to also have a repeat customer, a repeat appearance, be guides, like the Gray Man. Is a corporeal, benevolent guide spirit, right? The flip side of that coin, again, depending on how you want to categorize her, the French broad siren appears in your dreams, guides you, pulls you down to the river, maliciously drowns you. So then you kind of get into Beck's hole from like Becky Cotton, where there's that hole in that cursed water spot, that deep hole in the water where the cries come out of, that kind of guides people down to that hole where the bodies are. So anyway, that's a category that I would want to put those three stories that we've talked about in there. And then lastly, and certainly not leastly, the ghost with the most, Blackbeard. He is quite literally every other ghost story.
For real. I mean, I'm going to stick to watching Our Flag Means Death. That's what I have to say about Blackbeard. Although one day we're going to do an episode about this because all the stuff between Steed and Blackbeard happened off the coast of North Carolina.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty much all I had. People like ghost stories. We've done a bunch of them. I wanted to break down, try to categorize some of them for fun to also serve as a little bit of a primer for if you're new for the show. Those are the names of some of the stories that we've talked about that have to do with ghosts. You probably came here for ghost stories, or so I figured, there you go. There's your Halloween hangover.
I think that if I were doing a categorization, which is not to say that your categorization is wrong at all, I think it's more to point out that each of us has different ways of thinking about these things.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I would probably make a grid so that it's possible for a given ghost to fall into more than one category.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, because the one that I experienced in college seemed to be very conscious of what was happening, but there are lots of ghost stories of ghosts that seem to be unconscious, and it was corporeal and even capable of at least appearing to interact with the physical environment. And then lots of ghosts. The ghost story is, well, we saw, there's the one that Tally told where we saw a torso and that was it, not even an entire body, much less one that could interact with things. It's a weird topic. And it points out that it's more of a spectrum of experiences than a couple of hard and fast rules. The only way that we're ever going to have productive conversations about them to some degree is by trying to do some categorization so they can just be described in useful terms. And so I think that kind of thing is very useful and interesting. I don't know. I think also it's potentially an avenue to talking about different reasons why people might experience something.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was going for with this episode, right? Let's chop it up. Let's keep it light and chop it up and see what happens and have a discussion about it, because, a lot of times with the show, well, all the time with the show, it's the format of the show. We'll be like, here's the legend, here's the history, here's what we think about it next. And, over the course of those conversations, we do get into how we as individuals categorize things, but we haven't really sat down and listed those categories before, or attempted to catalog or to index in if it were you in a grid, the different ways that we talk about and think about these things. Wanted to keep it light. Thanks for being here. We will get back to your regularly scheduled history-based ones. I hope that if you are interested in any of the stories that we just mentioned, you go comb through the episode list and find them. There are 2 episodes of Sea Island Spirits. If you hate listening to us and want to look at us instead, you can do that. So yay, TV. Thank you, Beaufort County Television.
Yeah.
Please vote for us in the WRAL Voters' Choice Awards. And lastly, we will be unveiling our 2024 schedule. It's going to look a little bit different this year. We'll be doing that probably closer to the beginning of the new year.
Yeah.
But we'll have some regularly scheduled episodes between here and there.
Although I will note, we know already we're going to be at RecCon.
Yeah.
And there are links in the show notes currently and will be up until RecCon for how to register for RecCon if you're interested in going.
And that's the beginning of March?
Yes. First weekend of March.
Yeah.
In Cary, North Carolina.
Shake off those winter doldrums with Arcane Carolinas at RecCon.
Yes. Cary is, if you're not familiar with the area, it is right outside Raleigh.
Many, many acronyms that have been made for what Cary stands for.
That is true. Many of them we cannot say.
Anyway, thanks for being here.
I like how you were like, let's keep it light. And I'm like, let's go to the lab and talk about death.
I wish there was an Arcane Carolinas lab. You want to talk about, I wish we could do more video or get hooked up with some kind of producer. That would be my pitch. Give us a lab. Give us a lab to do stuff in. Oh, it would be so fun. Bill Nye the Science Guy meets Mythbusters meets whatever. I don't know. I could sit here and talk about this all day. I'm projecting it into the universe. Let's collectively apply our psychic powers to manifest it.
Be lovely. I want a secret headquarters.
It'd be amazing.
I wonder where the geographic center of North and South Carolina is.
I don't know. I know where the geographic center of North Carolina is. It's Purgatory Mountain.
Oh, yeah.
But between the 2 states, think about where that might be. Hey,
I will know a quick little behind the scenes for people. There was a second Purgatory Mountain story that I read in the lead up to spooky season and actually put on our schedule to record and then removed because I realized that it was a piece of fiction that had been written by somebody for the purposes of writing a piece of fiction. They weren't trying to scam anybody or anything. They were writing a piece of fiction and it was exceptionally well written to the point that I thought that it was a real story that they were reporting. And it was really good. And then when I realized it was fiction, I was like, we cannot just plagiarize this person's work. So, oh well. And that's part of respecting the small space that we're in also.
Yeah, but we're glad you're in this space with us, and
Yes.
thanks for hanging out. And if you figure out the geographical center of North and South Carolina and email us, I'll send you a very special sticker that hasn't been released yet.
Oh, hey, look at that.
Ba-da-ba-dum-bum-bum.
Thanks for listening.
That's the segue. You've been listening to Arcane Carolinas. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed it. For more episodes, behind the scenes information, and links to our social media, check out www.arcanecarolinas.com, where you can also buy the Arcane Carolinas book.
And if you like award-winning horror and science fiction, check out my books at michaelgwilliamsbooks.com or visit my publisher, Falstaff Books, at falstaffbooks.com. And if you have story suggestions, comments, or questions, email us at arcanecarolinas@gmail.com. And thanks for listening.